Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to say to you, welcome to Channel 4.
Hello, and welcome to the Ident Review, the show where we have a good look and chat about the various television idents that we have come to know and love over the years. And for this instalment, we're taking a look at one of the most requested Channel 4 offshoots on this show, and that is Film4. Film4 was first launched in 1998, back then being a subscription, pay-by-month based service. However, due to falling profits in the early 2000s, Channel 4 would eventually reduce the scale of Film4, and by 2006 had made it completely free to air in all Freeview-based households. And the idents we will be looking at today are actually the batch that debuted when the channel became free to air back in 2006. So without wasting any more time, let's take a look at the first of these idents, coffee.
Now in Film4, Brian Cohen is mistaken for the Messiah, and it's really not all it's cracked up to be. John Cleese, Michael Palin and the whole Python team take on organised religion in one of the cinematic comedy classics of the 20th century. Just remember to always look on the bright side of life, in Life of Brian.
Certainly an interesting one to kick things off with. You'll notice as we go on today that a lot of these idents are trying to represent or replicate filmic scenes or traits, which makes sense as this is Film4. The idea of the coffee cup dropping and smashing has been seen in some films, as like that shock moment when a character discovers something absolutely game-changing. But right off the bat, I think it's quite a weak premise for the sequence as a whole. Sure, it certainly looks nice to look at, but I think a stronger concept could have been chosen. Anyhow, let's move on now to our next ident of the day, that ident being glass.
It's a double bill of John Wayne now on Film4. At 10 to 5 you can catch him in The Undefeated. But first, the Wild West legend teams up with master director Raoul Walsh for one of the most expensive westerns ever made. When civil war splits a small town, Sheriff Wayne is the last hope of saving its people, and of course, the damsel in distress in Dark Command.
Why is there something oddly satisfying about glass smashing? The fact it's in slow motion makes it even more appealing, as we have little moments where we can see where this glassware has been cracked and how it splits into several thousands of pieces. It actually does make me think of a scene in a James Bond film, Moonraker, where a fight scene sees several glass items destroyed. Again, like the coffee cup, you could argue that this is a film trait, again a more subtle representation of one, but like the former, this one is definitely appealing and strangely relaxing to watch. Not great by any means, but not terrible either. Let's see what we have next up now with this variant, Pillow Fight.
John Wayne does Wild West action like no one else at 5 to 3 today in Dark Command. First though, we're matchmaking the outback with the urban, as Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski discover it's a jungle out there, whether you're in Oz or NYC. Hit comedy from 1986, Crocodile Dundee.
This one definitely has an 80s vibe. I don't know what it is, and it could be me being wildly stereotypical, but seeing a pillow fight and the slightly washed out colour tones reminds me of many an 80s teen movie. In that sense, the ident does really well at encapsulating a movie moment or trait, because a pillow fight scene is quite recognisable to many viewers. At first I thought the clip was being played in reverse, which looked a little strange, but thinking on it now, it also reminds me of 80s horror, with characters appearing happy as Larry before they meet their inevitable demise. So definitely an example of capturing a movie moment for an ident sequence, and in my view, it works well. But let's keep pacing forward now and on to our next ident today, water.
The Monty Python team are always looking on the bright side of life at 9 o'clock tonight in The Life of Brian. But now in Film 4, it's time for this week's Guilty Pleasure with some classic comedy with the wit of Sid James, Kenneth Williams, Joan Sims and the whole gang as they get up to army antics in India in Carry On Up the Khyber.
Definitely mixed feelings on this one. I like the initial concept and how this sequence starts, with the body crashing into the water. It's very filmic as it occurs in many a film indeed. But how many times have we seen a character crash into the sea whilst it being shot from underwater? But aside from that, this is a classic example of having a strong start but then not really going anywhere. I know it seems tricky to do more with this set as they seem to be only filming sequences via one shot primarily, but even something extra occurring or different shots would have made this one far more impactful and memorable, so sadly a little disappointing for me. Next up now, the ident I have for you is Window.
Now, cinematic legends John Wayne and Rock Hudson star as ex-colonels in a classic Wild West clash. Can they put their differences aside to fight off the bandits and protect their people? In The Undefeated.
Now this one I do like a little more. It's arguably just as strong as a concept as the water one. Someone smashing through a window pane is once more another very common movie trope. But where I prefer this one to water is in the amount of detail we get to see. With it being in slow motion, we get to see every inch of detail of this character breaking through shards of glass. Now granted, glass smashing is something we have already seen Film 4 do today, but if I'm honest, I think I prefer this one to the one earlier. It's more recognisable to movie viewers, and is interesting and again relaxing to watch, getting ready for whatever movie is coming up. Speeding forward now as we travel towards our next ident today, and that ident is Car Chase.
Ian Holm is Napoleon Bonaparte, perhaps in the Emperor's New Clothes at 10 to 3. Now a day to forget for David Paymer when he's forced to drive the school run and gets taken hostage along the way. Tom Arnold is the criminal influence the kids all seem to warm to, so buckle up for comedy in Carpool.
Now this is one of the most recognisable movie tropes ever. A car chase in action movies is almost always a given, especially nowadays. I've also realised that the slow motion thing is definitely a constant throughout all of these so far. Maybe Film 4 were the slow-mo guys before their time. In any case, I love this little sequence. Sure, it's as stereotypical a car chase as you can get, but that's why it's brilliant. And presuming it's played before action movies, it's the perfect setup. Also, final little detail, I like how when the Film 4 logo cuts across the screen, and cuts up the screen up into little bits, we do see slightly different angles from where this sequence is shot. It's nothing major, but it's a nice touch. Probably my favourite of this set so far. Now then, onwards to our next sequence today, which is titled Splash.
Finishing off a week-long season of films from Argentina now with a tale of four-legged friendship as a chance encounter and a good deed alter the fortune of a jobless middle-aged man. As the pair leave the Patagonian desert, they find a place in the world in the shaggy dog story of Bonbon El Perro.
A really warming concept, but dull execution. It's sadly noticeable now that the formula they go for, one key shot in slow motion, does work well sometimes, but in other times does grow stale. For this variant, the moment where the feet splash into the puddle, there's something really great and brilliant about that, something that's just pure fun. But even though we see some different angles or takes as to how this is done once the Film 4 logo appears, like the water one earlier, there just isn't that extra oomph or impact to keep me interested. It does look great to view, but I long for something more or an extension to it, though I'm sure some of you are going to love it for what it is. Anyhow, let's take a look at the next ident in our list today, and this ident is Kiss.
Thomas Hardy's The Woodlanders is at 10 to 5 this evening, but first on Film 4, Oscar-winning romance from 1970 when two Harvard students enter a loving relationship, overcoming family obstacles and taking on terminal illness to live life to the full. In Love Story.
Topless kissing on Film 4? Ooh, you tease. Again, like the pillow fight sequence, this for some reason reminds me of many a cheesy 80s teen flick. I'm not sure why, but let me know if you feel the same way. I mean, what else is there to say about this one than what we see on the screen? Two people kissing in slow motion for a long, long time. They say that many humans find the sight of others kissing uncomfortable after a matter of seconds. Well, here you get nearly 30 seconds of them doing this. And whilst I'm not a prude in any sense, after a while you do wish the continuity announcer would hurry up and start the film already. Of course, a couple kissing is probably the definitive movie trope, as it can occur in seemingly any genre possible, so it only makes sense for them to riff on it for an ident sequence. But I still think they could have made it more interesting and less awkward than just a couple kissing for 30 seconds. Have a build-up, have these characters meet or cement their relationship in that 30-second time frame, and have the kiss as the big ending reveal. So even though it's a great movie trope to use, it certainly isn't a favourite of mine here today. But never mind, for now we're going to move and take a look at our next sequence, Bottle Shoot.
Vinnie Jones proves he's a mean machine at 9 tonight, but epic western adventure now on Film 4 as Kirk Douglas gives up politics in the Senate for perils on the open range as he leads a diverse group of settlers towards a better world. But there's trouble in store from America's treacherous landscape, savage Indians, and a very disagreeable Richard Widmark in The Way West.
More glass-shattering sequences? Come on, Film 4. Again, this one is tricky to critique because the idea of characters shooting or someone training someone to shoot properly by using glass bottles is a movie trope that is used. So the concept is definitely valid, but if you're going to have the slow motion thing running throughout your entire ident set, then I wish we would get some more variation than just glass breaking. It does look stunning, of course, but considering I've seen 2 glass shattering based idents already from Film 4, I'm finding it hard to be wowed or captivated in any way by this one. I suppose we'll keep trucking on now and see what our next ident has in store for us. And that ident is paint.
The sci-fi season has landed on Film 4. The Fifth Element is at 9. First, though, we're matchmaking the outback with the urban, as Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski discover it's a jungle out there, whether you're in Oz or NYC. Hit comedy from 1986, Crocodile Dundee.
Now, if BBC Two has taught us anything, it's that slow motion paint is incredibly satisfying to watch. If you're familiar with the BBC Two ident of the same name, then you'll know exactly what I mean. To see this paint splatter out of the can and flow all across the ground has definitely been the most satisfying and interesting sequence of this whole set so far to watch. The only main criticism I can fathom here is that a paint pot spilling over isn't the most common or even most recognisable movie trope out there, but aside from that, the bright orange colours look fantastic on screen, and it's a strong example from this whole 2006 set. Now onto our penultimate ident of the day, we have Car Crash.
Now on Film 4 we begin tonight's war season double bill with a violent, bloody depiction of the medieval Crusades. Orlando Bloom takes the lead as Balian of Ibelin, who leads the fight as 2 religions battle for Jerusalem, supported by an outstanding cast including Liam Neeson and Jeremy Irons. Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven.
Here is an example of an idea rehashed that doesn't quite land. What I mean is, before we have the car chase sequence, which was a classic movie trope that was simple and also worked really well, with this one, sure yeah, a car crash is just an iconic of a movie trope as a car chase, but considering we've already seen 2 slow motion moving cars today, this one just falls a little flat. The crash itself doesn't even look that impressive or even that appealing to watch. I don't really have much more to say on it, it'll have its fans I'm sure, but it's certainly one of the weaker ones for me. And now we have to move on to our final ident of this set today, Explosion.
Finally tonight here in Film 4, epic in scope and scale. There's strong language, bloody gangster violence and sexual violence in director Sergio Leone's final film. Robert De Niro returns to the New York streets where he and his childhood friends rose to prominence as violent gangsters in the majestic Once Upon a Time in America.
As we all remember, cool guys don't look at explosions. Like the car chases before, an explosion sequence with someone running away is probably one of, if not the most recognisable action movie trope in existence. An explosion in slow motion are also quite nice to view, seeing the flames grow increasingly bigger and more elaborate. I think they could have done something a little more crazy and out there, with either multiple explosions, or even when the Film4 logo cuts up the screen to see completely different explosions happening in different places and events. It's quite a fitting end to the Film4 2006 set, I feel, to end with a sequence that any moviegoer is bound to recognise. Overall, how do these Film4 idents stack up today over 13 years later? Well, I think some of them work incredibly well, such as the car chase and explosion sequences, whereas others are either just a little dull or even just retreading old ideas, namely smashing glass it seems. But if the Film4 relaunch was to show anything, it was to show that this was a channel for movies, and most of the sequences today do encapsulate and showcase that theme, that movies are indeed alive and well on this dedicated channel. And so we've come to the end, but before we go, the final words from our broadcaster. That was all this week for this instalment of the Ident review. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and we hope that you tune in next week. You can tune in to the Hits review on Tuesday and a special video on Thursday, both of which broadcast at 8 PM. But until then, have a good week, and we hope that you join us again soon. Good night.